if there's no trees in the world, we're not in the world either. It's just fundamental. We're dependent on it for our breathable atmosphere, for every single need we've got, our food, drinkable water, all our materials. Even the things we dig out of the earth are all part of past or present ecosystems. So it's as existential as that. Without functioning ecosystems, we are not. Every morning I just put out a little note about where we're working, and also a weather forecast. We've been doing that recently, not always right. It says weather fine, and I'm about involved with some filming at first, then mowing grass, etc. My name is Hugh Wilson, and I'm a Kiwi born in Timaru. I'm a botanist and a reserve manager, I like to call myself, kaitiaki of Hinewai Reserve. So I did a big, detailed, very, very interesting botanical survey of Banks Peninsula, and all the time I was thinking, gosh, this landscape is trashed in terms of its natural ecosystems. I thought, wouldn't it be lovely to just look after at least a bit of this much-loved landscape of Banks Peninsula, which I've lived next to virtually my whole life. But I thought I'd never have enough money to do it myself, and it was just one of those serendipitous things. I was introduced to another businessman, to Morris White, and he had set up a fund to do exactly this, and that's how it started. When people ask me why we're doing it, I find it a strange question in a way, because we're totally dependent on healthy, functioning ecosystems. And the ecosystem of Banks Peninsula is a forest ecosystem, which was largely wiped out. So just in its own right, it has intrinsic worth, but also for our own lives as well, which we're part of an ecosystem, really. I just see it as a very, very important thing to do.
My name is Warren Begley. I'm 60 years of age, passionate, activist, interested in the environment, interested in legacy. I've come over to Hinewai today to catch up with Hugh Wilson and discuss our progress to date and some plans for the future. Oh, it's lush, isn't it? It's
looking lovely now. Yeah. Every time it seemed to get dry, then we get a dollop of rain. We've had over 100 millimetres
in the last
7 days.
I remember around 20 years ago now walking up through Hinewai at the end of the Banks Peninsula track, and you were doing some track work.
Well, I was amazed I was trying to work Warren out, to be honest, because he seemed to me a young businessman, and I thought, gosh, here's a young businessman wanting to be involved in this sort of project.
What words do you like to use? What are we doing? Are we regenerating a forest, or are we forest restoration?
I don't know what words you use. When you say regenerating a forest, it sounds as if you're doing it.
You're doing the work, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Would you say we're enabling the
Yes, we're helping. We're helping by removing some of the bad things that we've done and just letting nature get on with it. Yeah. The whole of the West Track we're walking down now was just a exotic grass with a lot of gorse, which the farmer kept trying to fight and never won. So you'll still see some gorse here.
So if we jump forward 200 years from now, on Hinewai we're going to have pockets of quite different
forests. We're going to have a mosaic, which is what it was from even before people got here, maybe 750 years ago.
Right. It's going to be really interesting, isn't it, to have a look around in a couple of hundred years' time?
It will be interesting, certainly. Well, what are you coming back as?
What Hugh and those with whom Hugh works provides us is a blueprint. We can move forward with confidence, utilising their techniques for reforestation at a landscape level.
Now we dive into the regenerated Kānuka. See, this was completely open. Just 30 years ago, this was pasture. At least part of the solution towards global warming and our ridiculous burning of fossil fuels in terms of carbon sequestration, growing trees is very, very important. One of the really big problems in terms of carbon sequestration by forestry in New Zealand is that the easiest way to sequester carbon quickly is to plant exotic softwoods. Pines, you put them in, you know exactly what you've planted, you can measure it exactly, they grow incredibly fast. The speed of it is a bit misleading because the pine graph in terms of carbon sequestration goes up very fast to about 25 years and then starts to fall away. Right. Whereas the native forest regeneration climbs more slowly but just keeps on climbing. After 25 years it carries on for decades and decades and decades. I see the answer in terms of forestry is to let these millions of hectares of marginal, often weed-infested hill country regenerate naturally into native forest. You don't have to plant it, but the trouble is, it is difficult to measure. So one of the important things is to make it simpler, and it can be made simpler. Even things like drone technology can make it so much simpler to measure what's happening on the land and give an accurate measure of how much carbon dioxide is being sequestered.
Piwaka-waka.
Piwaka-waka and Pipipi, because they're constantly chirping about how good life is on the reserve. Biodiversity, simply stated, it just means all the numbers of species of plants and animals and bacteria, everything of this mishmash we call life, and the interactions and everything to form a functioning ecosystem, of which I said we're completely dependent. And so is everything else. Every unit of it is completely dependent on this amazing network of life. We live on an unbelievable planet, to be honest. Over huge millions of hectares of New Zealand, this will happen. So I really like the idea of Hinewai being one big, nice, big, dramatic example of it happening, and people are taking notice of that. There's not a farmer around us now who isn't completely behind Hinewai. The boundary between the Nabi farm, which is our biggest boundary down there, you can see that on a satellite photograph, sharp. It's like the Great Wall of China. It's just vivid as a sharp demarcation between deforested, grazed pasture land and our regenerating forest. It's like Warren talks about healing the land. I mean, this is a forest landscape, really. That's what nature intended it to be. It has all sorts of biodiversity values, carbon sequestration values, habitat values for the things that have every right to be here and which we love. The prospect of global climate change is just absolutely terrifying, and whatever we do here, it almost seems sometimes as if it doesn't matter what we do here, it's going to overwhelm us anyway. But the thing is that the more of this sort of thing happening means it's less likely to be overwhelming us. So it's fundamentally important to do it at whatever scale anyone can.
I stumbled on this property advertised for sale here in New Zealand on the internet. So this property was put on the market at the beginning of 2020. The trees were probably removed 100 to 150 years ago, and then people have tried to eke out a living by farming this land with probably limited success from a financial point of view. It borders the Hinewai Reserve, which is a regenerating forest in its own right that's owned by the Department of Conservation. It presented as an amazing opportunity for a forest regeneration project somewhat similar to that which is being undertaken by Hugh Wilson, which is only 2 valleys over from us here. They have been undertaking their work for 30 years, and so our vision is that if we could take this parcel of land, this 110 hectares, and imagine ourselves in 30 years' time, instead of these introduced grass species interspersed with thistles and all kinds of problems that requires the use of chemicals, fertilizer and weed killers to suppress. Instead, we would be looking at a landscape more like this, which is a land that's beginning to heal. Many plants that are endemic to this part of New Zealand are threatened. So it's really, really important that we transition this land away from traditional farming, which never really worked on this kind of land, and allow nature to heal, the land to be healed, which it will do. That process is measured in not decades, but hundreds of years. But it has to begin somewhere. And that's why we're standing here today, because it's the beginning.